the carbon border adjustment mechanism is a very specific regulatory measure. So it is not a, we are going to charge a price on carbon for all imports across the board from all countries. The carbon border adjustment mechanism, as it is being implemented by the European Union, is a specific measure on specific products that are being imported into the EU. Now, that is set to expand over time, but it will always be done in conjunction with the European Union's emissions trading system. So, to take a step back again, it's a charge that is levied on the carbon intensity that's embedded in a specific product. And those products at this point fall within the following categories only. They only fall within the categories of cement, iron and steel, aluminium, fertilizers, electricity, and hydrogen. So there are a number of what they call precursors as well. So within each category, there are a couple of codes, product lines that are included in this carbon border adjustment mechanism. Essentially, if your product falls within that, there's annex at the end of the actual regulation, which shows exactly which products fall within the scope. If your product falls within the scope, then a charge is levied on the carbon intensity of that product. So this obviously needs a lot of reporting and a lot of being able to measure and verify, which is a very intense administrative burden along with the charge that's being levied. So the two big implications of carbon border adjustment mechanism are, on the one hand, the actual charge, and on the other hand, the administrative burden. Being in South Africa, where we have a high carbon intensity of our products, of our production, and I believe previous colleagues who've spoken on this would have gone into more depth here, but South Africa has a very carbon intensive grid, and so the products that we export, if you're using grid electricity, have a high carbon intensity. If you're able to access renewable energy, then if you're able to show it in the way that it is required in the CBAM, then you will have a much lesser carbon intensity in the product that you're producing, depending again on whether it is the direct. So you need to report on direct emissions and indirect emissions. Okay, but this is all being phased in over time. So at the moment, we are, and it's not always indirect emissions that need to be reported. So at the moment, we're in a transitional phase, and in the transitional phase, there is no fee that is levied, no charge that is levied. Exporters do need to report on their emissions, however. So each quarter, exporters to the EU have to report their emissions. Now, this is currently a big challenge, and in South Africa, but not only in South Africa, everywhere else, exporters and producers and importers in Europe are struggling to comply with this at this point. But the point is, right now, there's a transitional phase. There's no charge levied, but you have to report on direct and indirect emissions. Once the transitional phase ends at the end of 2025, then you move into a phase in which the charges will be levied. But in that case, charges are only going to be levied on indirect emissions in certain instances. So while reporting has to be done at the moment on direct and indirect emissions, once the charge is being levied, a number of products will only be charged on their direct emissions. So they won't be charged for the carbon intensity of the electricity that they use immediately. Now, this is all set to be reviewed at the end of the transitional period. So everything is quite uncertain. A number of products might be added at the end of the transitional period. So a lot of this is reasonably uncertain, but there is quite a bit that is known and that has been published. And at the moment, that is the case. But what is important in terms of generally when you speak about the CBAM and when you think about it, it is it'll always be implemented in conjunction with the European emissions trading system. So the products that fall under the CBAM will be products that fall under the EU ETS. And while EU ETS is set to expand, so more products could fall under the CBAM in the future, the point there, from the European point of view, is that at the moment, under the European emissions trading system, local producers are provided free allowances, so they can emit up to a certain amount within this free allowance. These free allowances are being phased out, and as they get phased out, the carbon border adjustment mechanism gets phased in order to level the playing fields, as the European Union says.